my name is Vishnu.
And my name is Jayant.
And we're doing the Martel pond presentation. So before we start, what is the Martel pond about and what is introduction terminology? The Martel pond is basically an artificial pond created by humans. And the introduction terminology is basically that the Martel pond is currently undergoing the process of eutrophication, which is an aftermath of pollution due to the excess runoff of pollutants from sewage systems or agricultural fields. And this is basically where the DO or the dissolved oxygen rates decrease as the water quality increases. This is about the oxygen sag curve, and the techniques used to find the quality of water include finding about the DO, the turbidity, the temperature, the conductivity, the nitrates, phosphates, and the pH. And what is the HOA? The HOA is the House Owners Association, where they have seen troubles with the pond as though there are some unseen insects and green algae growing in the pond. Here are the conditions and comparisons about point source pollution and non-point source pollution. The point source pollution is basically a source of pollution that has a specific point where you can source it down to, and the non-point source pollution is where you can't really source the pollution from, and the Martel pond is basically a good example of that. And there are various challenges faced in order to control these pollutants, including finding the correct amount of dissolved oxygen, regulating sewage systems, etc. What is water quality? Water quality is a measure of the condition of water relative to the requirements for one or more biotic species and or to any human needs. So this is basically where it is basically where a quality of a stream, river, or ocean is depicted, and the water quality is very, very important because it depicts a condition of water, and a poor water quality can reduce the biodiversity and also decrease the dissolved oxygen rate, which increases the biochemical oxygen demand, which is the oxygen required for organisms in order to decompose. So this is the importance of water quality, and this can also, high water quality can also impact a very healthy environment. This is about a Martel pond and the primary problem. And the primary problem is because it's undergoing eutrophication, where there's a nutrients boom, where the algae is currently the algae currently grows to its zenith, where the decomposition increases, and the BOD, which is biochemical oxygen demand, increases along with it. Here's our data and analysis.
So this section includes the averages of the Martel pond data, the graphs, and its analysis. It also considers some terms to be explained, as well as the order, as well as the process with which the
So it basically upheld the 7 different periods data of the Martel pond. Here's our table with the 7 different periods data: the dissolved oxygen, the probe used for dissolved oxygen, the water temperature,
turbidity, and the pH and everything. The flags.
And here are your 7 periods of our average data.
And then these are the conductivity, nitrates, and phosphates, and these are the extended form of the last table from the previous slide, and these are the average data which we averaged from the
So what it's saying is there are 7 different periods with their average data, and what's happening is now we're going to average this data further on in order to calculate the final water quality index. And here's the further on average data for each and every different section, as I told you before, which measures the water quality of a pond.
Here's our analysis of the data. So the average DO, the conductivity, the pH, and water temperatures, as well as the amount of nitrates and phosphates. These all come to the same thing. The water quality looks fair and good, but it doesn't, because there are many foreign particles. The amount of pH or the hydrogen ions in the water also decreases the life support systems, and the amount of nitrogen phosphates, which booms the algal growth.
Yeah. And pH is 7 over here, around 7. So here's our dissolved oxygen. The dissolved oxygen showed a value of 5.683, which is very moderate, and it is a concern because it can drop very easily. And here's a graphical representation of the 7 different periods average data, which is around 5.683. The red is the average data, and the blue is the dissolved oxygen. Here's our temperature. Our average temperature for air was around 29.276 degrees and 27.92 degrees for the water temperature for the pond. And here are 7 different periods and the graph for it. And now one important thing here is dissolved oxygen is basically you conducted with a probe. And the importance of that is we already told you dissolved oxygen level, and temperatures from the usage of probes and internet. Here's our turbidity. Turbidity is basically the purity of water. It could be low or high. A lower turbidity means the water is more clear. Higher turbidity means it's more unclear. And here's it was using a probe and a tube, and this was our graphical representation. And our average turbidity was 6.31, which indicates a moderate turbidity, and it is close to the proxy of being terminated as a bad water temperature quality. Here's our pH graph. pH is basically the acidity of water. It could be basic or acidic, and the pH, good pH is around 6 to 8, and we got an exact pH of 6.8571, which is very moderately good, but it indicates a very relatively good condition. And here is our graphical representation. Here's conductivity. Conductivity is basically the ability of water to conduct electricity or heat. There was 78.413 S over M, which is a fairly good conductivity rate, and this conductivity can be found through the materials such as alkalis, chlorides, sulfides, and carbonic compounds. And these are our 7 different periods graphical representation. phosphates and nitrates. So phosphates and nitrates are basically the nutrients bloomed into the water, which increases the algae development. And we have nitrates, which is less than 5, and phosphates, which is 2.787, which indicates a very average numeric nutrients flow. And it's kind of high, but not that high, so it's very, very moderate or average, which is pretty good, which doesn't increase high algae bloom, but it is moderately good. Algae bloom is moderate. And here's a video of the outlook of the Martel pond. As you can see, here's some water sources coming, and here's your undeveloped parts, your algae growth due to your nitrates and phosphates. Here's our decaying plant life, and here's our sewage systems close to the pond. And now we're going to see a few macro invertebrates where we found a dragonfly nymph, we found a scud, and finally we found a fly larva along with another one. Here's a macro invertebrates and the water quality index. Jason, take care.
And the 3 types of macroinvertebrates are found as scud, the fly larvae, as well as dragonfly nymph. These 3 macroinvertebrates are somewhat sensitive, which means that they live in the pollution system, which is polluted but not at an extreme case. The pollution is moderate. So the dragonfly nymph is a predator in those waters, while scud and fly larvae feed on the decaying matter. So the water quality index can be primarily calculated by the macroinvertebrates found in the specific location, as some of the species which live in those specific conditions also determine the pollution in the water bodies.
And we found a water quality index of 6, and a biotic index is a scale for showing quality of environment by indicating the types of organisms present in it. Here's a Trinity River connection with the Martel Pond, and what's happening here is basically the Trinity River is very, very polluted, and this is coming from the research from the Dallas News, which illustrates that Trinity River is one of the most polluted rivers, and that's due to the toxic industrial pollution there from dumps, which is also indicates more and more agricultural or industrial sewages. This can kind of connect with the Martel Pond's water quality, and the excess addition of runoffs also increases the dissolved oxygen's reduction, and also increasing phosphates and nitrates in the Martel Pond.
As you can see, this is also an example of non-point source pollution because there's not exactly one source like the dump in the Houston. There can be other sources which can be added to the river along its way, so which disturbs the condition of the Martel Pond. So this is the data analysis of the Martel Pond. So from the analysis of the data, we can get the main topics concerned. So how do nitrates and phosphates reach up in the pond, and where is the point source pollution located? What and where are the types of food particles located for the macroinvertebrates for them to thrive?
What are the effects of the Martel Pond on the Trinity River, or Trinity River on the Martel Pond, and why is a good pond condition important for the HOA? And the major sources are basically agricultural runoffs, lack of adequate sewage systems, and climate change. Here are causes and preventions, and your algae growth, nutrient runoffs, and wildlife concentration. Algae growth, as we discussed, it's basically a filamentous and planktonic algae, is an example of an aquatic herbicides such as aqueous sulfates and copper complexes, diquat, and sodium carbonate peroxyhydride. These are different types of algae found in the water, which also indicates that there's high runoff into the water. And here's nutrient runoffs, which basically explains how these algae grew. And Jake's going to take us through the wildlife conservation.
So the wildlife conservation is about the wildlife. Why is not the wildlife attracted to the Martel Pond? It's mainly because of the 3 reasons, because of the human factors, like overpopulation of the pond or the more noise pollution which scares the wildlife away. So the wildlife is necessary for it to be attracted to the pond and its surroundings, because it brings various species into the pond, and it brings back the old natural ecosystem which it usually had before the water was being polluted.
Here's our abiotic and biotic factors.
So the biotic factors are the basic conditions necessary for the life to thrive in an environment. Although the Martel Pond is a good example of the stormwater pond, but there's no exactly the number of fishes found, as well as specific macroinvertebrates need other small species to survive, while species like scud as well as fly larvae feed on the decaying matter.
And the abiotic factors are basically just going to be your BOD levels and your dissolved oxygen levels, along with the growth of algae, which is also a biotic factor. Agricultural runoffs plays an important role as a specific human activity which searches the biotic index through the enhanced population of algae, and it also replaces an abiotic change through declination of dissolved oxygen, which is an abiotic factor. Here's the solutions, and now the water quality, the water can be controlled through the re-emphasizing of the Clean Water Act, which should be emphasized onto the pond, which basically talks about the water quality standards setting, the assessment of water quality, the issuement, and the enforcement of permit limits. The turbidity of water can be based on 3 different things: minerals, planktons, and humid turbidity. And now, how are we going to moderate water solutions? So to moderate water solutions, we need to use water filters spread of organic matter, and we also need to use lighting, fertilizers, and water filters should be controlled. And the human activity, such as campaigns, education, community groups, and economic incentives, can also be used in order to reduce the human impact through runoff sewage systems and industrial pollutions into the water. And also the controls of this can be reduced, and the cleaning up and restoration of damaged systems and legislations and regulations of standards can also decrease the pollutants. And here's our proposal to the HOA.
So with a water quality index of 6, the Martel pond is at the border condition of being fair and moderate. So there are different methods for the HOA to maintain the pond condition, like pinpoint the source pollution or runoffs to know how the nutrients get into the pond, and clean the pond periodically in order to avoid the overgrowth of algae. And then this helps to restore the original chain of ecosystem by different species migrating into the pond, and which can be happen only if we encourage wildlife into the ecosystem. By the following methods, HOA can maintain a healthier pond by preventing small but dangerous life forms out of the river and supporting its life systems.
With also a complete regulation with all these solutions impacted and enhanced into the water. And finally, our conclusion. Our conclusion is basically it has good water quality index, which indicates good water quality, but it's at the border level. It may easily decrease, which impacts the water. And now these different methods over here indicate how the dissolved oxygen can also be increased through these different methods as shown in the solutions over here. And now finally, to conclude, the biotic index, along with the fishes, the turtles, birds, and all these, also increase the biodiversity in the pond, which in order to decrease the BOD.
But this cannot happen as the certain life vegetation as well as certain life systems are not in the pond to encourage this, these ecosystems as well as the species.
So in conclusion, the HOA can imply all these solutions into this pond in order to increase its DO and decrease its BOD and all the other factors like turbidity, etc., in order to maintain a good water quality and also increase the water quality index of the pond. Here's our bibliography from different websites and for which helped us in our research. And finally, thank you for watching.